Three things: a history of struggle and solidarity. Second, building of knowledge and understanding and critical capacity to understand what's going on in the world. And three, skills that range from interpersonal skills right through to being able to design, participate in the governance of, and deliver human services and to work in communities with people. So let me tell you about those three things very quickly. The important thing about the history of women, largely women, involved in social work and social welfare throughout the world, is that we, those of us who are currently in these roles, stand on the shoulders of women who fought incredible battles against all sorts of resistances to bring us to this point. That's the first part of the history. The second part of it is that when we look deeply into the history of social work, we're looking at the struggles of women. That for so long, social workers have been involved with the lives of women and the children, the relationships that women have in their communities and in their workplaces and all of that. The social work is proudly associated with the lives of women. And I think that's really helpful for us to acknowledge that history. We also have to acknowledge that history has not always served women and children well. In Australian social work, we are really only on the beginning of that journey to decolonise social work education so that social workers do not continue to contribute to the colonisation and oppression of Australian First People through the operation of the child protection system, the operation of the correction system, through tolerating big gaps in terms of health outcomes for First Peoples. These things are not confined only to First Peoples in Australia, but one of the major colonising forces in Australia has been to separate Aboriginal women from their children and to institutionalise and disadvantage those children and expose them to phenomenal risks of abuse and exploitation and violence. That's the way in which our governments have traditionally stepped in order to attempt to destroy Aboriginal communities and to destroy the enduring relationship with land. And so as social workers, we have to pay attention to what we've done in that space. The second area is skills. Very often we find in social work education, and I'm sure, Helen, you found this as well, that people come to social work because of their own lived experience. There is something in their lives which has exposed them to an understanding of injustice. And so we want to be able to recognise and build on that. And so when we think about how we might build our profession into the future via engagement in the education system, we must be open to be able to bring these very people that I've been talking about right in close to our system. But we can't just leave them there. Social work, lived experience is not a degree in social work. You need to be able to analyse critically the forces that drive up social injustice and oppression. And so that's where we take people on another learning journey. And I think that we disclose in social work, doing social work education, thinking about it at our ideal best, what is often hidden about the lives of women. We expose oppression, the nature of domestic relations. We help students understand intersectionality, that there's a corrosive nature to disadvantage when it's compounded by a whole lot of different injustices piling on top of each other. We work with students to analyse economic, political, social and conditions that expose the nature and extent of systematic disadvantage, violence and the sexual abuse faced by all women in all spheres of family, community and economic life. We confront patterns of privilege that we bring with us. And we need to be able to recognise that patterns of privilege are actually a whole way in which these kinds of oppressions are held in place. And so we have to have a look at it in terms of gender, class, race, disability and age. And then the other bit, which you and I, Helen, have talked about many times, is how we focus on helping people understand how change does and can happen. We give them a theoretical basis and a practical basis in understanding that we are people who are involved in making change. And so when I think about that in terms of theories and thinking about our sisters in Indonesia, I think about the value of Marcia Nussbaum's human development approach and the human capabilities, and Wolfender Schalit's work on corrosive disadvantage and fertile functionings. And that if we have some of those kinds of systems operating in our social work education and in our practice, we will have clearer pathways for building change. And then that takes us into how do we equip people with skills to be engaged in that very important agenda. It provides skills to build solidarity with disadvantaged, marginalised and oppressed women, a preparedness to face the suffering of women and to challenge it, believing in the capacity of all women to flourish in freedom and to commit with other women to that struggle. That's the heart of what we have to do. But as part of that, we have to realise that women need to be able to take control of all of those services that are sitting there in place so that those patterns of privilege and those long traditions of colonisation are not repeated through our practice.